Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hope it's not too early on your end.
It's not actually. So
Okay, perfect. Is there if I just jump straight in then, actually, because
absolutely. Yep.
I only had time to watch the first episode, but I'm a huge Fallout fan, so I'm very excited for this.
How many did you see?
Just the first episode. I got access
Oh,
last
just the
night,
first one.
and
Okay.
I thought I'll watch a little bit, and then before I knew it was 2 a.m. So, um,
Well, there's a lot in the first episode. So
it gave me more than enough to speak about for sure. I think the first thing that came to mind is the Fallout universe has been used to convey so many different feelings, stories, themes. So when it came to this interpretation of the Fallout universe, one of the first in live action we've seen, what what does it mean to you, and what were you hoping viewers would take away from it through the production design?
well, when I honestly am not much of a gamer, and I actually gave this game to somebody as a gift for Christmas, who later said it changed their life. But and they said, "Oh, you also played it, but you sucked at it." Uh, I had to learn about Fallout from researching it, and the best research I could, the key to it all was going on YouTube and watching these tutorials that fans were making. How do you make your own overseer's office? How do you think? And then also about like history and stuff like that. I had a research department, and I pulled it, and became overwhelmed with the amount of not only the history of it all, and I used to fall asleep listening to the history of Brotherhood of Steel. And so, because I was just like, this never ends. This is so and then I realized what a challenge that was going to be, because there are these people who love the game, who were making their own mods and creating their own versions of stuff that they thought were cool. And I was going, and then so I felt like I had to honor that. Like, I got attached to them, and because a lot of these things were very well produced, like they had music and all, really edited super well, and clearly took a lot of time. And then I realized what a big challenge that was going to be, and I kind of went to everybody that I was working with, and I put up a bunch of stuff in a conference room, and I said, "Okay, this is what it's going to look like." And they go, "Great," and I go, "Oh no, you don't understand." There's so much in here. I said, it's going to be, and then I think what was great is I got to, because of working with Jonathan Nolan, my history with him with Westworld, he kind of took some of that. Like, I knew in Westworld, for instance, they would expand the park we shot in Utah and stuff like that, and these beautiful things, and I said, I felt like we were going to do the same thing with, that it wasn't going to be CG, that there was going to be reality to it. He wanted, for instance, the power armor. Oh no, it has to work. That fell into my lap, and I'm going, I have nothing about this. And then I had to we enlisted this company called Legacy, who did like Iron Man and stuff like that, but they had never actually made it quite as functional as this particular suit was, and it took quite a while. And we really worked hard, because it was very important that it be almost like a character, and that our actor, the actor would wear it. We had version that the actor could wear, but then we had a stuntman for some of the other ones. But we'd be on set, and the stunt guy would be like hanging out, and he'd just start dancing in the suit. And I was going, and then I felt like we had actually successly figured some of that out. And it's cooked a lot of R&R and development and stuff. So I maybe didn't answer your question.
It gave me a lot to think about anyway. That's the main thing.
Okay. I forgot. Maybe I didn't answer. No. But I mean, as far as our story went, and it's like, because the story is not part of the existing game lore. So, which was great, because then I got to do stuff that had not been in any of the Fallout games. But I had to learn enough about Fallout to know, how do I process things, or, any crazy new device we would, which I love, the props, all the weaponry, and then making like, raider weaponry, which is made out of scrap pieces that they found, and idiotic, but trying to Rube Goldberg type things. That was super fun. All that stuff was fun, and going to a location, going, okay, how do I fall out this? How do you do that? And the decorator, her name's Regina Graves. She doing like the vaults, our vault, the Vault 33, as people will find out, is a control vault, really. And well, there's a lot of stuff going on out later. I won't tell you, but but it's, they're not, it seems like it's the perfect vault. It's all great. So we assume that there was a catalog that you could get all your furniture in when you went to go buy your vault, and you could get different styles, or you could bring some of your stuff if you wanted. And so there was a mix of like, we had real vintage, but then like sort of the things that looked Fallout-y, which weirdly you can actually buy some of that stuff online. And we mixed this Regina, the decorator, she could do a whole thing. Like if you want to fall out your apartment, she could totally like set up, here's what you do. And like, even like we had wallpapers that were that we found this one company, and I go, these designs they're retro-y things, but what we just changed the scale of it all and made it, because in Fallout everything's a little everything's bigger than life, and so the constantly balancing scale was a thing. But and then this mix of like real vintage pieces, also with futuristic weird things like the what is it, Atomic Queen dishwasher that stuff like that. Lucy gets her head smashed into, things like this. So
everything like mundane has to just be larger than life. Still, it has to have that little Fallout quirk to it. I think that's a really good segue into another thing I noticed in the Vault Dweller segment of the first episode. Because Fallout, as you were saying, the lore is so expansive. There's so much to learn about it. But the show very confidently adds to that lore. It shows aspects of the vault that we never see in the games. We see Lucy's wedding. We see the vaults connecting. We see like an exchange. I was just wondering, was that like on purpose?
There's no cornfield. There's no cornfield in any of the games. Yeah. That came from the writer. And they go, oh, yeah, we want it to look like the musical Oklahoma. And it was actually originally written as painted, like it's a painted mural. And I said, okay. And then I was talking with Jonah, and I go, I don't know. I said something about it being a projection. And then he went, oh, wow. And so it then became like, which meant that we could fool you with like, so the projection is in like 3 planes. It's not 3D. It's 2.5D. That's what we called it. 2.5D. So, but it's so it could have that Oklahoma quality, but it was in a new technology. And then so there's that shot with the projector in the beginning showing you that all. That's not in any vault, or that was. We just like, I looked for the most giant projector I could ever find from the 50s, and we kind of then turned it into the atomic projector. So
with that, when you were approaching having to make this cornfield, having to make all these different rooms that we just don't have a reason to see as players in the game, was that when you kind of were quite, confident with the lore to add to it, or did you have kind of Bethesda over your shoulder saying like, hey, this is how we imagined this would look, or were you just sort of let loose on how you would do this vault?
Well, it's interesting. So I that was the first one I got hired. I said, how much is Bethesda? Am I answering to? Because I've done movies like with like NASCAR races. And I had to talk to every person in NASCAR. And it's a family-owned business, which makes it even more complicated. And I was doing race cars and suits and the whole thing. And it was the level of approval I had to go through was crippling. Although it worked out, but we were under a real tight time frame and that. So I thought, oh, am I going? Do I have to do this whole thing again? And no. What happened is that, like in the beginning, it was my choice whether we were going to take Fallout and make it sleeker, maybe, or strip it down and make it more, and I at first that's what I thought I was going to end up doing. And then as I learned about it, I was going, God, the friggin' crazy bolts and the shapes and the weird, that makes no sense, like bracing, like somebody was super stoned and just drew this thing, and I began to really love it. And so this was early on. And like, for instance, when I was working on the power suit, Bethesda hadn't quite, they were just letting us do our thing. And so I had to have somebody totally model it because I couldn't get it from the game. We had to remodel it all. I didn't have the assets. But so then we finally did have this meeting and I laid it out. We did a bunch of concept stuff and they said, "Oh, you're doing the game." And I said, "Yes." The challenge is we're doing the game because it was, and all of it's crazy, whatever. And they said, and then after that, they honestly let me just do what I wanted to do. And because I sort of proved to them I understood what the game was. And so when this new technology came through, all this stuff, we didn't, they were informed of it, but they actually let us do it. They let us create, what we thought. But it was very important to me that it always honor what the game was. So we had lots of new things and new crazy devices and stuff like that, and new locations, and that we would, that was the great fun of doing it. So, but it had to be with respect to the game. And that was important to me. I became attached to them because of watching them make their own mods, like, and I couldn't use any of that stuff, but I could see like, oh, what did they do? And then I go, oh, well, that's, so essentially I did my own mods of the game. So.
It's interesting because you probably were watching the same sort of Fallout history videos that we watch as fans towards the end. Yeah. So you feel quite entrenched in the fan base at this point.
Yeah. So, and then I began to, maybe, in my job, just the job, what I do, I often have to get into like, I know a lot of obscure things about it. I know, for instance, a lot about the Liberace, was that piano player back. I know way too much about him, way, because I had to do a whole movie about him, and I learned all this stuff, and so. But this is another thing. So,
I think one thing that fans are really going to look forward to in the first episode is that very iconic, the Vault Dweller, Lucy in this case, leaving the vault for the first time. That is one of the most iconic bits in any game that has a Vault Dweller. With the games, whoever's designing the first thing we see outside the vault has to be mindful of where the player's going to be guided, where's our first quest going to be. But I suppose you don't have that restriction when it comes to television. It's all about the emotions, perhaps how Lucy's feeling, how you want the viewer to be feeling at that point. What was the thought process in designing what Lucy's first look at the real world looks like?
I'd worked with Jonathan Nolan for quite a while, and he fell in love with this place in Namibia in Africa. And for years, he's been saying it's this big town buried in sand that was a mining town that was abandoned before World War II. And there was also these giant structures where they processed diamonds basically and blew them up because they didn't want anybody else coming and using the thing. So, and it's just this. It says apocalypse when you just look at it, and it's just like whole like neighborhoods just sunken in sand and eroded by years of we were in a meeting and he goes, Namibia, and I go, yes, this is. So we go to Namibia and we're standing there, and I go, and he and I are looking at this like. It's just stunning, and the waves crashing on the ground. And the story actually wasn't written for LA in the beginning. We were standing there, and he goes, and I said, "Wow, it's too bad we can't really look at the water. It's fantastic." And he goes, "But what if we can?" He ran off to the writer, one of the showrunners, and the other producer walked up to me and she goes, "What's going on?" And I said, "I think you're looking at the Santa Monica Pier." And she goes, "What?" And I go, "Look at it. It's the Santa Monica. You could see it." And so that was, and it was so epic and huge and just, really hard to shoot. It was like 60-mile-an-hour winds. It's totally almost uninhabitable. And nobody had ever shot there. And it was like, but it was really like having that be a real thing was very important to having Lucy, who, I'll have to say that in TheGamer, I've already been a little bit torn apart by the fact that it's too clean. The show looks too clean. But in the trailer, she looks like the perfect vault dweller. It's part of the setup is that she has to go into this most dismal place. And when you look at that town in Namibia, it's just so desolate. It's like, so that was fantastic. And then Lucy later on, by the time, she gets trashed, that's completely trashed by the end of the show. Like in about episode 4, she's like, they're cutting things off her and it's just, she's brutalized and, so.
So you had to start from the cleaner aesthetic to get to the gritty to show the journey.
And I think in the first trailer, especially, it was like, why are they all so tidy? And I was going, that's because it's part of the story, telling the story, that was part of it. So, and then that set the tone for everything else we did. So I dumped a lot of sand. We shot in New York, actually. It's the rules of crazy filmmaking. You actually live in LA, but we went to New York and we ended up shooting in LA and New York. But it's like, I dumped a lot of sand in a lot of places as a, tie it all together.
To falloutify it all.
Falloutify it. Yeah. So we get to locations and go, what's going to make this fall out? So, lots of rusted, burned out cars helps, by the way. So.
One thing about Fallout, which I think some people were a bit nervous about when the show was announced, was that there's kind of a debate about how much of a satire Fallout's meant to be. What is it satirizing? Is it satirizing anything? And because it's, on the one hand, you've got the contrast of Vault-Tec, all squeaky clean, all American, and then you've got the realities of the wasteland, very much not like that. So I'm wondering how you sort of tried to replicate that in designing this world, were you trying to satirize parts of like 1950s American culture, nuclear bomb fears? I'm not sure if it was duck and cover over there or in the UK. One of us had it. I'm just very curious to see how you. It
was in the States too.
Yeah.
So,
just fact, how that sort of influences.
I'm so old that I used to have to do that. For instance, it's also like a Vault-Tec, the whole Vault-Tec thing is you go and you see how the setup of it all is. You find out how truly evil they are, which is great. That's fine. And then bleeding the clues in. But one thing I can say is that the showrunners, Graham and Geneva, who wrote it, I felt like when I read it, the humor to me is like even, it's sophisticated because it's subtle. It's often subtle. It's not, but it's also like they just bought into some of the, they accepted the craziness of the game, but they also put a very human thing to it. And it's also, for me, when I watched it, it was going, okay, there's this girl. She basically is set out trying to, do an altruistic thing, save her father. You find out later on what a disappointment that's going to be for lots of reasons. And but it's like, so she has a set of beliefs that is challenged as soon as she walks out that door. And, and including that, I love that scene where she goes up to the, Ma June in the sort of Philly, and she just laughs at her like, "You're just such an asshole," and then she finds out that eventually you find out that the ghoul, who's one of the main, is actually more human than anybody who came from Vault-Tec, because he's had this challenging life experience. So putting those Easter eggs of sort of like building that up. So, for instance, the Vault 33. One of the reasons Vault 33 is, you think it's maybe a control vault when you find out later it's not. It's got a horrible archness under it, but it's important. It doesn't look like that. So sort of the perfectness of all that on, the sort of exaggerated retro futuristic 50s part of it all is more preserved in maybe other parts of the game. But a lot of time when you play the game, things have already been trashed, or there's, the plants have taken over the whole thing, or, lots of the experiments become clear. And this one, you didn't know what the experiment was. And therefore it's true, closer and truer to what the Vault Tech salesman was trying to sell you. When you find out later on, in fact, it's this horrible thing then. And especially that vault is actually a key to essentially taking over the world. So it's just like, I just loved all that, because the humor in it actually is was how do you make things, you can take things that are Fallout, and then it also, like the whole post-apocalyptic thing, which I've done in other shows, it's like so dry and sort of, even, there's not, this is to me, like, because of the humor, it just releases things. I mean, it's the show's quite violent, but it's funny violence. I mean, it's not, and that was important. That whole balance, finding the balance of all that was in the writing, and it was part of how we would discuss how we would do things as well, trying to find the right balance and tie it, which is in the game. I mean, there's a whole lot of the subterfuge in the game and stuff, like even sort of the ghoul and all his addiction to drugs, and that's all kind of in the game. Maybe not. He's a very special ghoul, and there's a reason, but those things were in the game. But also now we latched onto the sort of subterfuge of everything and the sort of ironic humor. And what's great in the show is that I got to do flashbacks to before the bomb, and so in the game, they're always kind of in a suburban neighborhood, and it's like the houses, quite frankly, are all kind of hokey, kind of they're, and I said, no, I want it to be like, because we're in LA, right? I got to have some latitude. And I said, no, we actually went to a like very mid-century glass box kind of house and I made it much sleeker than the houses that are in the game. And I did that on purpose, to try to, like, as a step later on, it's sort of, you get that in the vault in the thing. So we got to play with us sort of this style of things, and I shifted out of the game for some things, but we always applied whatever the game's mindset was to it. So as a way of keeping it all cohesive. But I think the underlying thing is the humor is what makes the show like fun to watch, and that's, and we had some great actors who really kind of totally crazy fun to work with. So
I will say right away, Lucy absolutely nailed it. Within the first, I'd say 10 minutes, I was already laughing at almost everything that she was saying, because it was just summarized it so well.
Yeah, and she says that, and you go, oh my God, she is so deluded.
Yeah.
And then, and it's like, the perfectness of the vault, it's like, which gets shattered quite quickly. I have to say. Like, I kept saying, hey, were you going to see any of this stuff I did? But there's later flashbacks and stuff, and then we finally, in later episode, you get to see more. It becomes more about that vault and some other vaults, which you haven't seen yet, later in like around episode 4. So you get to see other vaults with whatever their experiment was and stuff like that, which was also fun to do. Take the same vault and kind of rework it.
Just to finish off quickly, obviously, when a series has just been told through video games for so long, I think that can be a very personal experience for people to play them, to make their own Vault Dweller, to go off, and the Wasteland is how they interpret it. If anyone's kind of a bit maybe on the fence about seeing someone else's interpretation of that, what would you say to reassure any fans who are a bit nervous going into the show?
I think that what I had said earlier about like how the fans felt became super important to me. I think more important actually than the people I was working with, because I had to really study and look at visually what it was. Well, why does it look that way? So then I had to understand how these things progress, or what is this? This is the enclave. This is from the enclave. There's we have a little brief piece in the enclave that actually used to be bigger, and I'm sure more enclave stuff will come in other seasons. But it was like trying to find all that, and I kept just how impressed I was, and that I just like. So I think that I could. I think I learned enough to respect, and then I got and it wasn't just me, because I got my whole team. Like we were like. People would find people, because people would be drawing different things. And then it's very important, like for instance, in the vault, that we have an overlying approach to how things were being, the language all had to be the same because it's a manufactured thing, right? So for instance, we literally based everything on the game, the kit that you can get in the game to build your own vault. We literally followed the rules. We took the parts, pulled them apart, and then analyzed it and said, okay, you can't make a room shaped like that. They were weird shaped rooms, honestly. I would never draw. Like they were just like they were either too big or too small, but it's because of this unitized approach. And then, so my team, everybody got really excited. They'd find something online and we'd all share it immediately and go like, oh, cool. And then we'd all, oh no, you have to, have one person talk. No, we have to use what they use for what's the corner detail on a thing. And it was all translated over. And I think that sort of protection of that kind of, and respect to that kind of detail, I'm hoping will translate to people feeling rewarded rather than let down about, because that was really, for me, when getting into it, that's what I really was hoping that I could really sell to people. So.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
You can tell I'm still excited about the game. So.
No, I can't wait. I'm going to binge the rest of it after work today. I'm really looking forward to it. So,
okay.
Yeah.